Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our latest Finovate webinar, Critical Steps to Accelerate Digital Transformation in Customer Support. I'm David Penn, Research Analyst with the Finovate Group. Today we feature a presentation from Alexandra Mack, Senior Solutions Project Marketing Manager with Zendesk, and Brian Kale, Head of Customer Success with Bank Novo. Together, Alex and Brian will discuss quick steps financial institutions can take to digitize their customer experiences at a time when scaling support operations is crucial. Alex and Brian will walk us through digital customer support initiatives that are quick to deploy and can deliver big results. They will show us how these customer-centric initiatives can help scale your support today while strengthening your client experience for the future. Before we begin, just a reminder that this is an interactive presentation, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Send your question to us using the Ask a Question button box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address those questions at the end of the presentation. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Alex and Brian, take it away.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Brian and I are really excited to be here with you. I'm Alex, and I lead Solutions and Customer Marketing here at Zendesk. If you're not familiar with Zendesk, Zendesk is a service-first CRM, and we build tools that give companies of all sizes the ability to deliver transparent, responsive, and empowering customer experiences. Customer data across platforms to give agents a unified view of their customers and their interactions, and empower them to provide even more personalized service. I think we need to acknowledge that it's been a crazy few months. Businesses, individuals, and all of us have been working to find a solid foundation, both for our work, for our lives, as everything has been in a period of massive change. There have been major financial implications for businesses and especially for financial institutions. Consumers are facing a huge variety of disruptions and uncertainty right now, and a lot of them are looking to financial institutions, they're looking to banks, advisors, and they're looking for lenders to give them advice on what to do. Businesses across the board are also being impacted, and they're trying to figure out their long-term path forward. They need support from financial institutions in more flexible ways and more personal ways to figure out how to stay afloat right now. So the topic that we're here to talk about today, digital transformation, this is nothing new in financial services. Consumers, businesses are changing, and what they're demanding is changing from their financial institutions. At the same time, digital native banks are pushing the envelope and are leading this challenge to mainstay institutions to build customer experience from the ground up, to communicate support and support customers with the level of service that they expect. So facing this uncertain future and where we are today, what's a FinServ player to do? What are we supposed to do to keep up? One of the major trends that we have seen at Zendesk is that the process of digital transformation is changing. Many companies for a long time have looked at digital transformation as this moment in time or this major initiative or set of initiatives that they have to embark upon with an end in sight. And that's really starting to change. So as companies are thinking about how do I drive this massive change within my company, they're also facing these immediate emergencies. They have to deliver service while they're dramatically shifting their operations. So what we're seeing is that a lot of leading brands they're approaching digital transformation as a journey, and they can take one step at a time. And this is a huge benefit also because deployments can happen faster, can see what your results are going to be sooner, and you can iterate along the way. The challenge becomes wanting to build a very solid and forward-looking foundation to future-proof your long-term innovation goals. So we'll get into some examples. That sounds really high level, but we'll get into some really hands-on examples of that today. And what does it mean to future-proof, and how can you build a solid foundation for digital transformation? particularly as you're trying to kind of go through this mindset shift where digital transformation goes from being a big project you have to do to essentially a continuing evolution of the way you will evolve along with the ever-changing demands. And that's really what forward-thinking businesses need to do for long-term success. So before we get started, I'd love to get an understanding of kind of who's here in the audience and what are some of the challenges that you're facing today. It'll help us to, both Brian and I, to talk about things that we feel like are relevant to you. If you see on your screen right now, there's a poll up asking the question, what's the biggest customer support challenges your organization is facing right now? You can select as many as you feel are relevant to you. And this will help us to think about, how we give examples and guide you through this conversation today. Another thing to think about as you're answering this question is, what are things that have been true over the long term or trends you were seeing for a long time versus things that you're seeing just over the past few months? And we can talk about some of those different changes too. All right, last chance. All right, so it looks like there's some pretty steep competition here. But understanding customer situations so agents can personalize conversations and guiding customers who are having to go digital for the first time, I think are two of the ones that are very high on the list. I can definitely speak to both of these, and I know Brian can as well. So it's super interesting to understand, like personalization, I think has been a trend for a long time, but is very hot right now as consumers are having extra personal challenges and need their financial institutions to cater to those and help them answer really hard questions. And then everyone is moving, I think, across their entire lives to be digital or more digital than ever for the first time. So we can definitely spend some time talking about that as well. Thank you, everybody. So at Zendesk, we track anonymized data in what we call our benchmark repository. And essentially what this does is it looks at data across the industry to help us understand what different trends we're seeing across customer support in general, and we can also drill that down into specific verticals. This helps us see where there are spikes in different types of consumer behavior, and we can also see what businesses are doing and what's effective and what's not effective to deal with these different types of behaviors and make sure that they're still delivering great experiences. So from the beginning of this pandemic, we've been tracking ticket trends across 23,000 Zendesk customers week over week. We've seen some results that around spikes in support requests, and that those have tended to go along with outbreak numbers and government announcements across the globe. So what you're seeing here is essentially ticket volume across enterprise companies and divided by their business size. And what we see very clearly is that there's been this peak, this very large peak for enterprise financial institutions, and this peak really happened kind of at the beginning of May, and now we're starting to see, it's still very high, but maybe hopefully leveling off. So probably no shocking results here to anyone who's been in the industry to see that ticket volume has increased. You probably all are feeling this every day. Historically, when there's economic volatility in the market, clients and people they're feeling uneasy and they're looking to their financial institutions for support. In addition to that uncertainty, there's shelter-in-place orders, as many of you mentioned in the poll. You're seeing customers who have done their banking in person for a long time, moving online for the first time, or moving portions of their communication with you online for the first time. Additionally, with unemployment rates reaching all-time highs, consumers are looking for types of help that are different than the types of inquiries you might have been seeing before. And those types of inquiries are spiking around, how do I manage my finances right now? I need a deferred loan payment. How do I get help with managing my credit card payments? There's a lot of volume and also a lot of personalization, as many of you mentioned. Business clients as well are trying to take advantage of customer assistance or of government assistance programs like the PPP. They're having, on top of that, a lot of the same challenges, frankly, that consumers are having. So looking for flexible payment terms, essentially to help these businesses come out on the other side of this crisis. The impacts are vast and varied, and I think all of you are seeing that as well. So there are a lot of new challenges that the financial institutions are seeing, and many of these new challenges are being layered on top of existing challenges. And they're also exacerbating some of the issues that maybe were already present at the beginning of the crisis. So before COVID-19, one of the biggest barriers that we saw to growth and digital transformation, especially for financial services institutions, although we see this across other industries as well, is antiquated infrastructure. And that antiquated infrastructure often leads to siloed data sitting in legacy systems. This is a struggle as financial institutions try to figure out how to increase personalization. As many of you pointed out in the poll, it's very hard to personalize when customer information is decentralized. And not only is it hard to personalize, but sometimes, especially now, it's even hard to just answer basic questions, given the same challenge, given that your data is in different places. Then, on top of this existing challenge, overnight, immediate issues arose for customers across the globe. These new challenges layered on top of some of these existing challenges. There were suddenly a huge influx of tickets from customers, and not only just from customers in the same vein, but these panicked customers who need help and are looking for support. Customers are moving online in droves, many for the first time. And on top of all of this, employees at banks are adjusting to a completely new style of work, with often the entire workforce moving remote practically overnight. So what is a bank, what's a financial service provider supposed to do when there's a scared customer base who needs them more than ever? I think one of the things we talk about a lot at Zendesk that's important in any business, but particularly important when you're dealing with something that's so personal to your customers, whether it's their livelihood and their life and their business, is to remember that all of our customers, whether they're consumers or they're businesses, all of them are human. And there's a person at the other end of the line who's just trying to solve a problem. They're trying to get some stability in their life or for their company. And adding a little bit of personalization to the communication process can be done in little steps. It doesn't mean you have to have everything completely personalized on day one, but bringing even just some of the right data to agents on the front lines can make this feel a lot better in each interaction. This personalization helps people feel understood, and it helps them feel understood and heard also while your company's trying to figure out how to keep up and how to answer some of these questions that they're hearing for the first time and that you may not have an answer for on day one. The other thing that FinServ companies can do is make sure that you're tailoring your conversations to meet the communication preferences. So what we mean here by communication preferences is speaking appropriately given the channels in which you're talking to your customers. You want them to feel like they've connected, much like we want to think about our customers as human. You want your customers to realize that there is a human within your company too who is helping them. And so being able to understand the channel where you're talking to them can help bridge that human-to-human connection, even if it's over chat. So if you're opening new channels or managing huge waves of volume in existing channels, understanding how you communicate differently in chat versus email or on the phone can help put your customers at ease. I think this green box about scale is actually super important because all the personalization in the world isn't going to help if you can't manage your inbound requests. So if they're not talking to you, they're not getting personalized anything anyway. So to help, a lot of companies that we see are leveraging AI and automation tools. And this can help reduce the volume of tickets that your agents are handling. By enabling your customers and people who are coming to you for answers to find those answers quickly using a support bot or by turning around common questions using automations, you can free up your agents for more high-touch demands. That helps people get answers more quickly and also enables you to build stronger relationships with your customers who really need help right now. And of course, finally, and this is true all of the time, but especially true now, there's no one agent in your company who has all the answers. And it really takes a team to deliver a great experience and sometimes even just to deliver a simple answer. And to do that, you need your cross-functional communication to be working flawlessly. There can be even more challenges right now dealing with an all-new or an all-remote or semi-remote environment. And luckily, there are a lot of tools that your teams can use to bring the right knowledge together and answer customer questions. And I'll get into some of those in a little bit. So as we've been talking about, customers are looking to their financial institutions right now for advice. They want to feel supported and they want to feel understood. So having basic information at your agent's fingertips can help make a really big difference in expressing empathy when you're communicating to customers. And there are a couple of pretty simple ways that you can use basic customer information to tailor an experience. So you can show them that you care about them as an individual and also build a stronger relationship with your brand. We know that most consumers, they want that personalized financial advice, and that shapes, and that is shaped by their personal preferences. It's shaped by who they are. We're not all the same. So one example is with shelter-in-place orders, and this is a good example, yes, I think especially given the poll results, is that shelter-in-place orders have caused a lot of customers to go digital for the first time or go digital in a much larger scale than they ever have. And knowing which customers of yours have done their banking online before versus those who typically have performed all or most of their transactions in person, you can customize their experience. Agents can use that information to change how they interact with a customer. And you can also use this information to segment your audience and send targeted messages in a preferred channel. So if you think about someone who maybe online banks all the time and they come in with a question, they're not going to necessarily want to hear, and they might feel like their time is wasted with a 101 level, how to log into your online banking. But being able to deliver a message around making online banking much more approachable might make someone who is doing this for the first time feel a little bit less intimidated. It's also a really great way to educate your clients on the value of online banking and utilizing your web tools, which is a great step towards digital transformation in general. Another example that also speaks kind of to that scale and how do you deliver this personalization is thinking about like if a customer's bank account balance is low, an AI chatbot could use that information to serve them up relevant content. So helping them understand what are their deferred loan payment options or how can I dispute an overdraft fee. And that basic account information can also help inform agents in how they approach a customer's inquiry. So if a customer has a mortgage loan with you, you see their account balances are low, the agents can be prepared with the right messaging to tell them about smart lending options or deferred payment options. So there are a lot of little steps you can do with basic information to just show empathy, even if it's about something just about their regular behavior. It's more, I think, important than ever to provide advice based on their personal circumstances. And as many people are just feeling really overwhelmed, it can help them just remember that they are a human, you see them as human, and that can really make someone's day and change something that could have been a really worrisome conversation into something that they feel like they now have control of. Communication preferences in consumers and businesses alike have been changing for a long time. And understanding the changing of communication preferences is another way that you can show empathy and another way that you can personalize. So I'm going to read a quote from an IDC article on creating loyalty, and then I'll kind of dive into how I would break that down. But I think it really captures pretty well the importance of empathy in your different types of communication. What IDC recommends is that companies focus on what business choices they can make by using the empathy scale to inspire loyalty that will be key to their future success. So one of the 4 business outcomes that are driving this change is that businesses need to focus on is predictable communication. Communication is the foundation for every interaction throughout the customer journey. It must be predictable for both the customer and the brand, and communication leads to understanding. It is multi-channel and is inclusive. Okay, so that's a lot of words. And but what does it mean? Like, how can you adapt your communication channels? How can you think about being multi-channel as you communicate with your customers? So let's take a look here on this slide. We can look at how Zendesk is seeing end users turn to a new variety of channels in different ways throughout this crisis. We see that requests are coming in on messaging, chat, and social media, as well as text. Those are up significantly, and they're outpacing traditional channels like phone, where we actually saw the total number of tickets decrease. We think this is likely because call centers have been overwhelmed, and as customers can't get a response quickly enough, it keeps them away from using this existing channel. These numbers aren't surprising in some ways because consumers across industries do prefer to do business with companies in the same way that they interact with their friends and family. So we're seeing some of these trends even before the crisis, and we're just seeing them become doubly true now as people are beginning to lean into communication preferences where they're most comfortable. When you're handling customer inquiries, it always helps to take a proactive approach. You can reach out to them and you can communicate with them in the channels that they prefer. Another thing that helps is taking an inventory of how your customer channel preferences are changing. And then that way you can shift your internal resources based on this information. So you can make sure that you have the right agents in the right channels doing the right things. With Zendesk, it's really easy to spin up new conversational channels and also, again, adapt in between channels as you are seeing changing consumer preferences. The other trend that, again, is not totally new with the current crisis, but that has been growing for a long time, and we've seen a lot of acceleration, is that customers want to find answers for themselves. It's helpful for them to find answers for themselves, and it's very convenient for financial institutions at a time like this. So populating a knowledge base of self-help content and adding more articles to your existing online help center, all of this can help deflect common questions for both customers and agents. A lot of customers are used to searching for answers online. They have this Google habit, and catering to this behavior can help save anxiety for your customers, and it can also reduce volume for your agents. And maybe to take a little step back, when I talk about, deflecting common questions and providing answers even for your agents can also use your knowledge base and right now, as there are a lot of new and different questions, it's a great way to empower your agents to have those answers as well, those new answers. We have seen, using the benchmark data that I mentioned before, that our Zendesk FinServe customers are seeing a 29% increase in knowledge base views just since late February. So that's a huge increase and something that all companies, frankly, should be taking advantage of. It's important to keep in mind as you're spinning up, if you're spinning up a brand new help center, or even if you're just adding articles to an existing help center that you have, that you don't have to do it all at once. Just a few hours a day, tracking your most commonly asked questions and writing some really deep context articles can help, can be a great place to start. The other thing to keep in mind is that making your content searchable. So I mentioned consumers have this Google habit. They want to be able to search for keywords, and they have an understanding of how to do that just from their regular day-to-day behavior. And so making your content easily searchable by using keywords that you know your customers will use makes the content that you put all the hard work into creating much more discoverable for them. You can also further put that content to work by using machine learning to suggest articles to your customers to help resolve their issues, and we call that ticket deflection. And I can get more into that. I think actually Brian has some really great examples. So customers are leaning into AI, and they're to deal with this increasing volume. And we've actually seen Zendesk FinServe customers have seen a 114% increase in tickets resolved with our AI tool, AnswerBot. And AnswerBot uses machine learning to help answer customers' questions. So for example, AnswerBot can suggest articles to your customers to resolve their issues in any channel, and that essentially deflects the ticket away from the agent because the person can self-serve to their own answer. What we're seeing across the entire industry, even prior to this, is that customers are adopting self-service more each year. So our 2020 trends report has shown that self-service adoption in FinServe has grown by 5x over the past 4 years. So this is not a new trend, but definitely something to keep in mind as you're thinking about personalization and scale. So the last pillar that we wanted to talk about was around this idea of collaboration, and it takes a team to deliver great customer service, which can sound really cute, but what does that actually mean? So many in the FinServe industry and many across many industries were not prepared to have a distributed workforce quite so quickly. And this has caused a lot of strain for IT infrastructure. This sudden shift has led to collaboration breakdowns and has also strained the infrastructure when institutions are already struggling to bring disparate data together so that it's available for the teams and the people who need it. So we now know that some form of this remote workforce is likely here to stay or is here for some longer term period. And it makes now the critical time to map out areas where communication is breaking down and to identify bottlenecks in the processes of delivering great support to your customers. So as I mentioned before, it takes a team, and for many financial institutions, this is even a little bit more challenging because financial institutions are managing sensitive data, and many times there are specific people who have clearance to access some of the most sensitive information. So it's doubly important that close team collaboration is working smoothly. The good news is that no matter how many people in your organization it takes to resolve a ticket, there are some really awesome communication and collaboration tools that make it easier. Many of these tools work together with existing communication platforms. Your team can work and communicate in the tools where they are already communicating, And that can remain a seamless process, but can get tracked and move forward in a much more streamlined way. So an example is that Zendesk has some collaboration tools that streamline internal customer support workflow. So what does that mean? It means that agents can communicate with anyone internally and even sometimes third-party vendors on a ticket in email or in Slack. And additionally, you can create what we call child tickets within a ticket. And if you want to know more about that, we can talk after class. But essentially, the goal is to have all of the communication about that ticket logged within that same ticket. So as a result, everyone has full visibility and they can keep things moving so that the right answers get to the right questions quickly. And that transparency is so important for speed and also accuracy. So you can think pretty easily about all the ways that this can be helpful. So for example, if a customer is trading on your platform, that trade gets stuck in the order management system and the agent needs to reach out to a third-party vendor for resolution, that can all be logged within the same ticket so that they know exactly what to tell the customer and when. So online collaboration, always important, but again, doubly important now. And we've seen McKinsey has released actually some pretty interesting statistics on how collaboration platforms that connect customers to internal teams can reduce cost per customer by 15% or more, and can also cut down time to onboard a customer by up to 20%. So that's pretty cool and seems like something we should all take advantage of. As we think about digital transformation as this journey, we see more and more of our traditional financial institutions leaning into the success of digital banks as inspiration for how they can move forward and put some ideas and strategies together around digital transformation. So we wanted to invite Novo here to share how they think about customer experience. They've put some very cool initiatives in place. In some of them, it only took just a few weeks. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian Kale, who's the head of customer experience at Novo.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Brian Kale. I'm the head of customer success at Novo. We're a small business banking platform that's helping connect the modern founder to tools that they already use through integrations with Stripe, TransferWise, QuickBooks, Xero, and we also offer no-fee checking and debit accounts, which really help the modern small business who often are stuck with large fees from traditional banks because those fee structures are designed for larger companies. SMBs are kind of shrinking. Not the amount of them, that is growing more so every year than there are babies being born. But the internet tools like QuickBooks, as I just mentioned, have enabled companies to become smaller in size and start with less capital than ever before. And this has enabled everyone to turn their dream, their passion, their hobby into a business that they can monetize. They can even run it on the side as they're working a full-time job. And Novo wants to be the platform for them, as we see this as a massively growing segment in the community. Many of you have probably already interacted with them as well. So I joined Novo last January. We had about a couple hundred users when I joined. We had too many channels. We had 6 or 7 channels. We had live chat, phone calls, email, web forms. I'm sure many of you have tried to see all these channels before. We were using Intercom, our inboxes in Gmail and Zendesk. And one of the first things I wanted to do was consolidate everything into one omni-channel platform, and we went with Zendesk for that. We got rid of live chat, we downplayed phone calls, and we pushed our users into our web form and what we have in the app, which is the SDK, and I'll talk more on that in a second. But this has allowed us to better support the users on a channel that is readily accessible for them and comes with SLAs that are more in line with what they want as consumers. And I call them consumers as we see the size of a small business shrinking down to 1 or 2 people. They're acting less like businesses in the traditional sense and more like consumers. So even though we're technically B2B, we often refer to ourselves as B2C as the way we interact with our users. And so as we've entered into this time of all remote, going digital, and COVID, I often get asked, how has the current climate affected Novo and our business, and even a lot of the businesses that we see banking with Novo? We definitely see that there is an appetite to go digital, cashless, moving from cash to plastic. A lot of the payment rails that are becoming really popular now are like ACHs, digital transactions, and even digital checks and wires. And this has created, we've seen a massive influx in demand for Novo accounts, and I'm sure a lot of digital banks are experiencing this as well, as consumers are looking to move away from branches and onto their phones and onto the internet. So much inbound volume that we've actually turned off our marketing, and we're acquiring more users in a week than we used to in a month. But this is unfortunately also turned around and caused a massive increase in ticket volumes. And we suspect another reason that people have such an increased demand for digital banks is a lot of them were already looking for alternatives to traditional banking experiences, particularly in person. And now they have the time to dedicate to updating their businesses to better match their new demands, which is going digital. Many consumers keep their legacy banks while adopting digital banks. Chime had a great report on this last year. But again, all of this demand has had a massive increase on our ticketing volume, and we are still a relatively young and small company. And as we see more tickets in a week than we used to see in a month, we're trying to maintain our old SLAs. It's about an hour response time during business hours, 8-hour resolution times, while dealing with a 100 or 200% increase in ticket volume. And to do this, we had to adjust our support models. And as was covered by Alex, a lot of this will match what she's talked about, but this is how we've done it in practice. We've doubled down on self-service. We already practice a self-service philosophy, providing in-app education, proactive outreach education, and a robust FAQ center. We've actually doubled our articles since March going remote to better answer users because we see a lot of our tickets, about 43% of them are question tickets, and I like to view tickets as 2 types of things. There's like I have a question type of ticket, and there's I have a problem. And in banking, more often than not, that problem is where is my money? And it's very difficult to answer that question with self-service. But we are working on several initiatives with that. But the massive increase in articles has already had an impact on our support model and experience. Last year, as I mentioned, we moved away from live chat and towards the web widget and the in-app SDK, both of which offer up article suggestions when you write in. So outside of the chatbots, they will query what you say to them. So like, where is my debit card? And we'll return an article about debit cards and things like that. When we first enacted this, we saw a 30% ticket deflection, and it has been massive. And the more articles we add, as Alex mentioned, just by checking in on what people are asking, we add articles every day, every week. It has an ongoing effect. Another reason we moved to the mobile SDK in the app is it was more secure with a verified login. Many of you have probably seen in the banking space a lot of these live chat services like to ask for emails and send responses to emails, which can very easily complicate PI. So by keeping all of our chats in one verified channel, it helps protect our users as well as protecting ourselves. And that alone has been had a big impact on how we interact with them. And then finally, as was mentioned, we've adopted AnswerBot, an AI, in the last 4 weeks. Literally like 4 weeks ago to the day is when we turned it on. It's already on pace to resolve 200 tickets this month. I know that might not be a lot of volume to some of the people on this call, but we're doing about 1,500 tickets a month, so 200 is impactful. It's almost like we hired a mini person. It has about a 13% click-through rate with the articles, and that gets better as we improve them. And we see that there's been a positive experience with it. We've not had any complaints. And as noted before, most people, when they have a question, they want to just open up their phone, find the answer, and then move on. They don't want to call. They don't want to do anything. And that has been great because we don't want people to call either because calls are difficult to support, and they're often inefficient. And then to personalize the experience, particularly in this time, we have built into Zendesk a custom agent view that it enables our agents to see the account history, account details of a user when they contact our team. And this happens when they call, when they Slack us, when they use the SDK, anything, it'll link it to them. And this provides all the details our agents need to proactively answer questions. Like oftentimes people will say, I need help, but they won't really say what they need help with. But we can look at their recent activity and see an issue and respond back with, it looks like you had a check problem, how can I help, or things like that. And that really, really does make a difference. If you speak to the problems that they might be having, they know that you are definitely trying and care. And this alone prevents our agents from switching over to our database and has lowered our handling time from about 10 minutes per ticket to below 5. And we enacted this last year, and it was great. And during the COVID times, another thing to talk about is the PPP, as everyone saw, it was a big mess. But we were able to see when our users had the PPP push into their account, and we would proactively be helping them, congratulating them, and discussing with them. And I think as the PPP is coming up on the forgiveness time, this will become more important as people will have a lot of questions about why they did or did not get forgiven. And while we're not a direct lender, we do want to help provide our users with as many answers as possible. And we do that through customization and personalization. And so that kind of comes to the end of Novo, and we're at the question stage. I know there's a lot of questions right now that's coming up, so we can go over them together or how we pick them out.
Sure, and I just wanted to go ahead and remind those of you who've been listening to the presentation that, again, we are taking any questions that you might have, so feel free to go ahead and send them to us. You can just use the Ask a Question button there at the bottom of your screen and send us your questions. We've got about 10-15 minutes that we can spare for any questions that you might want to have, and you can address them to either Alexandra or to Brian or to both. If there's a specific topic that they touched on in their presentation that you really wanted maybe to hear a little bit more about or have them perhaps provide more examples or more explanations. There was quite a bit of really interesting detail in both presentations in the ongoing age of the customer that we've been living through. And again, I want you to encourage you to send us any questions that you might have, and I'm sure both Alexandra and Brian would be happy to answer them. I do see one question here. It has to do with chatbots and agents. That might be one worth starting about, since this is such a technology that a lot of banking consumers are encountering. The question is, how do you balance knowing when to use a chatbot versus when to use an agent? And the questioner was concerned about chatbots not coming across as empathetic toward their customers. I know that was something that, Alex, you mentioned, the importance of empathy in customer relations. So perhaps that's the topic that we could start things off with.
I think that's a great one because empathy is so important. And I think my take on this one, and Brian, I'd love to hear yours as well, is that there isn't, at least from my perspective, and I know that this is something Zendesk feels is pretty important, there's not a huge amount of value in pretending your chatbot is a person. I think that understanding that your customers are going to know the difference is fine, and saying this is a way to help them get answers more quickly, but also escalate to a person when they need that. So giving them the option is a really good way to understand, like, a chatbot is going to be good for a lot of the same things a knowledge center is going to be good for, but helping to make that content discoverable and bring it into, again, the channel. So when you're thinking about your channel strategy, putting a chatbot in a chat channel, or even having a bot respond to some of your emails and say, hey, can I answer your question faster with this great piece of content or this other great resource, is really helpful. I think then if the person is like, yep, I'm good, then you can move on and feel like they've had a positive exchange because they got the information that they needed as quickly as possible. But you want to always give them the opportunity to say, like, hey, my question is not answered, or my problem still exists. I do need to talk to a person. And so when we talk about deflection, that's kind of what we mean, is not trying to necessarily trick your customers to think your bots are human, but to answer questions, but provide that human touch when needed. So, Brian, maybe you can speak to this one a little bit, because I know you have been rolling this out over the past couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And also, unironically, I used to work for an artificial intelligence company that worked on chatbots, so I have a double experience with that. So, yeah, I think the number one thing you can do is not pretend that it is a human, as was mentioned. At Novo, we just gave it it was just called the Novo bot, or Novo. So not giving it a human name, not trying to give it a photo of a person, I think is great. And giving users a way out of it, and users in this term is anyone who interacts with it. So the one thing I like about the Zendesk bot is it will offer up 3 articles, and then it'll have like a 4th little button that says, or you can just talk to a human. And we do see a lot of times people will interact with the article before they hit the talk to a human, and they usually only have to talk to a human if the article didn't resolve their question. So if you start onboarding AI bots into your workflow, giving users an out of that interaction is huge, particularly during the first month or so of turning it on, because you need to understand how it's interacted with and how your users will interact with it, and make sure that you're returning enough valuable information that users find value in interacting with it. Because if it's returning, garbage, they're not going to it's just going to frustrate them. So very good question in this day and age, as we're all on board in these chatbots.
Excellent, excellent. There was another question that I wanted to pick up. This one was a little bit more specific, and it has to do with searches in Zendesk. The question was, does search in Zendesk prefer single-word searches, or does it handle long strings well?
David, I can take that one. So the way that search works in Zendesk is actually very similar to a lot of other search algorithms that you would see broadly in out in the internet. The driving philosophy of that is that you want people to be able to search your help center in the same way that they are used to searching other things. So what Zendesk actually does for each search is we return back results ranked by what we call our relevance score. And relevance scores assign different weights by keywords to different parts of the post that you have. So the title versus your tags versus your body copy. So as I mentioned in the presentation, understanding how your customers think about the questions that they ask is really important when you think about how you write the answers to those questions. So thinking about what are some of the words that they would use. So I think the question includes about, is it include strings? You absolutely want to think about what are the key phrases that they use and include those phrases in your answer, so when people search for them, that those are the results that rank high and come back and are truly the most relevant for the audience. I hope that helps, but I think more broadly when you're thinking about your help center, trying to put it in accessible language is important, not only for the searchability, but also for the consumability for the customer. So trying to think about the way that your customer would understand it, think about the way that they would ask the question, and all of that. It's kind of another way just to plug empathy into your content, whether it's an actual conversation or a knowledge center article.
Excellent. And that's just a reminder. We have both Brian and Alex available, so if your question is more general or more broad, we're really able to cover sort of all aspects of this conversation with regard to digital transformation and the customer experience. So we do have about 10 minutes left, so if you have a question, maybe you have a question that was triggered by somebody else's question, go ahead, use that Ask a Question button and send it to us, and we'll be happy to take care of it. Here's another question, sort of maybe going back to the broader frame of reference. This person asks, I like the idea of adding new communications channels, but it seems overwhelming to try and train our agents on new processes at a time like this. Does Zendesk have any suggestions? I think that's a pretty good question maybe both of you could tackle.
Yeah, I know Brian has had a lot more experience with this personally than I have, so I'm happy to speak to some like best practice information we have on the Zendesk side around how to structure your agents. But Brian, maybe you have recently opened some new channels. Is this something you might want to give us a real world example of?
Sure, yeah. I think the most important thing to understand is when adding new channels, each channel has its own inherent SLA that will be automatically baked into the experience. Like when you text someone or when you call someone, you expect them to answer, like when you call your mom or something. So that like consumers just think that calls should be faster and texting should be faster. So you have to staff accordingly. And then if you call and get put on hold for an hour, you might be pretty mad at the end of that hour. But if you chat or email in and it takes an hour to get a response, you might not even notice. So those are all the things you want to think about when adding on new channels. And in terms of training agents and process, it's definitely good to select like a team or specific agents to own the channel during like a beta rollout. So like they have time to interact with the whole channel workflow before you open it up to the whole user base. So if you A/B tested and segmented it off to like 5% of the user base for a couple weeks or a month, it really helps them get ingrained. And the next thing is practice. Obviously, it makes perfect. Training your team by just setting up fake tickets and everything, particularly when it comes to calls. Calls are usually difficult to train on because it's like real time and you're talking, where if it's chat and email, an agent, particularly a new agent, can take like a breather and step back and think about what they're about to say. But when they're on the call, it's in the moment, and it's tough sometimes. And I would always recommend not adding on a channel that you can't support with a reasonable amount. Like if it takes you 4 hours to answer a phone call, well, you maybe shouldn't support phone calls at that time. I don't know, Alex, if you have anything else from Zendesk's side about it.
And I think also one of the things that we recommend is, making sure that you have a way to look at the stream of conversations, which may sometimes move between channels, and that your agents have that visibility. So even if you have agents dedicated to a channel, they will have the history. So maybe if you're a chat agent, but someone has called in the past, making sure that the chat agent has the call history from previous interactions. Again, it's just another way to make sure that a little bit more context is available to your agents. So when someone calls, is contacting you for a second time, kind of as Brian mentioned, that your agents aren't kind of caught off guard and then thrown to the wolves with it.
Very interesting. Again, we are taking our questions. We've got about 5 more minutes left, so I think we've got maybe time for a question or two if you have one for either Alex, Brian, or for both of them, talking again about digital transformation and customer experience. I see a few here. Here's one question that I have, and I know this has come up from time to time in the general context of digital transformations and a lot of these really powerful productivity-enhancing, enabling technologies. And that sort of has to do with sort of the internal culture sometimes at some of these institutions when artificial intelligence, self-service, automation is brought in. Is there ever an issue or concerns that employees express about themselves, in a sense, being replaced by some of these technologies, or some of the things that they used to do at least being taken away from them?
One of the things that we
first,
think
I
of,
guess.
oh, go ahead, Brian, go
Sorry.
for it.
Sorry, there's like a lag. I mean, the answer to that is yes and no. I know Zendesk probably has, they talked to more users about this, but like if it's super busy in your company, like right now, there's so much in volume of ticket. A lot of agents like love the fact that it's coming on because it's helping out. But at the same time, I think it's up to a company and a business and the managers to communicate with their employees and their team about this, and also ensure that they've not ever overhired, which often happens in support centers. They will overstaff, particularly to support calls and during seasons. So I think it goes both ways. Like managers need to better manage the amount of staff that they hired in the first place, and then communicate effectively to their team about it. Alex, sorry for jumping in early there.
No, I think you kind of hit on it, which is, having the right staffing and also having a good understanding of how your tech stack is evolving. So one of the things that I think Brian and I both touched on was, when customers need an answer, they're more happy to self-serve or even communicate with a bot that they know is a bot because they just want to get the information. And when they have a problem, they often need and want a person, and they want that person right away and that person to be super knowledgeable. So the balance between answers and problem solving starts to shift a little bit between technology and humans, but it doesn't sort of make humans unnecessary in the process of either creating your automations and making the content that makes those powerful, or having that high touch, high training resolution as well.
I think it's a really, really good point, and I think we've got one more question that I want to add, throw into the hopper before we run out of time. But I really think those are very good points that you both brought up in terms of how that technology really can be made to work for people, not instead of folks. Here's one last question we'll toss in there, and it has to do with articles. It was directed for you, Brian, so I'll go ahead and toss it your way. And it's, is it time-consuming to add all of these articles? How do you decide what topics should become an article?
That's a very good question. And the answer is not really that time-consuming, because you'll find that if people are asking questions, your agents are already writing up copy to answer those questions. So it's very easy to source that copy and make it an article. And if they're answering over a phone call, you take the recording, just write it, and you can transcript the answer that way. So that's usually, I find it pretty easy to add the articles. It's on how to decide what topics should be articles. This comes down to monitoring what's being asked through healthy tags on your tickets. So like when people ask your questions, you should tag it appropriately so that you know this is being asked a lot. And looking at what is being asked but doesn't have an answer. So often these searching, like the FAQ Center has a search function. You can see what's specifically being asked and what isn't returning an article. And I check that about once a week and see if there's anything glaring and add an article based off of that. Or I add article tags to push answers specifically towards articles that we've already written. So there's a lot of tools usually built into these help centers that enable you to see what people are looking for. And then you can shift or add articles to match what is being looked for. But great question.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you all for your questions. That's about all the time we have for our webinar today, I'm afraid. So again, thank you, Alex and Brian, for very insightful presentations today. And of course, thank you to our audience for being a part of today's webinar. I want to remind you to please check out the link in our resource list that we're going to be presenting for more financial services resources that are available to you during the current COVID crisis. Please go ahead and take a look at that. Check out some of those links for some of the resources that are available, again, for financial resources companies. There will be a recording of this presentation available on the Finovate blog in the days to come. So if there's a part that you want to hear again or you want to share this with others, you'll be able to access it from there. Just stay tuned on the Finovate blog for that. So on behalf of all of us here at Finovate, thank you again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.